I'm always somewhat frustrated by talking sometimes to younger people. And by the way, they've plenty of older people as well who came in the
Yes.
60s, who seem to have this idea that unless we find perfection somewhere, that something is illegitimate. And also a kind of a blindness about history. If you want to talk colonization, let's go to the seventh century and look at the
Yeah.
whole of the invasion of the whole North African continent in one direction by Islamic armies who converted by the sword, and then the Ottoman Empire that got up to the gates of Vienna. But that also was what we're talking about. Let's talk about Indian Hindu nationalism now that sends off an assassination squad to Canada to kill a Sikh.
Right.
Let's talk about, what happened in Africa itself between various tribal factions, and let's talk about Southeast Asia. Let's talk about what China means to the world right now. And my point is not to make myself or yourself or our country look better by comparison. It's just to say once in a while to people, my point of view is let's check out the actual state of the human race through history and then be glad for those points of light we do have.
Right.
Case in point, and I don't think he'll mind, my very dear and close and best friend Ernie, who produces this show, is a gay married man to rock. They just celebrated their 20th anniversary. These are fragile new freedoms, and Rock and Ernie would in Saudi Arabia would be beheaded. Okay, so that's a little reality check.
Right.
That's the world we're in. I'm glad that I'm in a country where I can fight for their right to be married and not worry that they will be killed by the state. And when Mike Johnson wants us all to go back to the book of Leviticus and throw away the Constitution, I take it personally because Ernie's my friend. Let's get real here a second and be glad for what came out of the Enlightenment and what came out of the very imperfect colonial wicked West, because
Right.
this is all we've got. So, I get very upset because we're looking at something that will make everything that a lot of people who don't like our colonial past, it will make that past not only small by comparison of the authoritarian totalitarianism we could become, but it seems to have no sense of the moment we're in, that if you care about these things, all hands on deck. This is the moment,
Right.
2024.
Right. Well, and
Fight
by the
for
way,
it.
I would say that's democracy, and I think I said it at the beginning. It's also the climate crisis, and I pay a lot of
Yeah,
attention to it. I write about it. I think about it. I'm
yeah,
I'm doing what I can, and it's. I mean, the history of that is an interesting one, exactly because it forces a kind of shift in the look at, just say, the last couple of 100 years.
yeah,
I'm somebody. I grew up in around Chicago, and I witnessed and lived in around Pittsburgh for some years, and I witnessed sort of the fruits of the Industrial Revolution in terms of great industry that built the modern world, and
yeah,
the world that we live in, skyscrapers and automobiles and all of the things that define our world, depended upon what happened during the Industrial Revolution. And it's exactly that same, period of time that separated people from the natural world and led them to not pay attention to what the consequences were of
yeah,
growing carbon emissions, that has led now to the same thing that built our world, maybe the same thing that kills our world.
yeah.
It's sort of suddenly the Industrial Revolution and all of its remarkable achievements look a little bit different.
Yes.
Did we actually go down a wrong path a long time ago?
Yeah.
That doesn't lead me to say, like, I wish we didn't have the modern world. It makes me look at the world we have now and say, is there a way to do things differently? And I want to say one more thing about the sort of the climate change movement. There were years where that was very much focused on this question of, do people believe that climate change is real or not?
Mm, mm,
It doesn't really, that question doesn't really matter anymore,
no.
because my point of view is that whether you believe it or not, your house may burn down in a wildfire too.
Yeah.
Your house may wash away in a flood too. Your world may change whether or not you believe it. And so, in some ways, I think it is a parallel for the conversation about democracy, whether you
Yeah.
think our house is on fire or not.
Yeah.
Your house may end up burning down too. And that's why I think the work right now is so much about being able to expand people's capacity to as much as sort of know what's happening now every day, but to be able to think um, wisely, to think openly, to be more vivid about
Yeah.
what the future may be, and let that vision, both in terms of what could be better and what could be terribly worse,
Mhm.
let that influence the choices that we're making now.